Maybe tired of hearing. So we're brought to share the stewardship message for this month. And before I do that, I just wanted to, we get a publication from the ELCA called Stories of Faith in Action. And they share with us some of the witness of what our money is going towards, just so you get an understanding. You know, as a congregation, we budget a certain amount of benevolence towards our synod, which in turn uses it, a portion of that, but then also passes it out to the national church. So to give you some perspective here, in 2017, ELCA members, which is us, obviously, or a part of that, donated $1.8 billion to the ELCA to use for good works. And in this booklet, and I'm hoping that I can get an electronic copy that we'll be able to email out. We'll also supply a couple copies in the back. Just of how those donations are divvied out. There's examples of here, probably mostly congregations or mission churches or other kind of ministries within our country, but then also overseas in areas like Colombia and South America. So, some really incredible stories to be heard. Of that 1.8, 94.6 came out of the 94.6% of it came from the congregation. So really some staggering numbers and great works that we do as a church. So as far as the message today, I spoke, I looked at the readings today, and as you heard in the gospel, Jesus is questioning his disciples as to what they're arguing about, and they're actually arguing about who's the greatest. And you can imagine, I try to put these things into, biblical stories into what we look at, nowadays, and it's not hard to look far when people are claiming to be the greatest, whether it's politicians. I don't know if any of you are aware of what the word GOAT means. But it's an acronym for the greatest of all time. In sports, we hear that a lot. Tom Brady is the GOAT of NFL quarterbacks. But of course, I like to remind people that back in February, he wasn't so great when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But I digress. But the greatest on our terms on earth are different from what God's definition of great is. And Jesus explained this to them and explained this to the disciples in the readings. As he was bringing a small child into the group, he said, "Whoever welcomes one such child welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." And that just means bring the children to church. He said many times in the Bible, let the children come. And Donald Jewell, who wrote in the definition or describing this reading, said that this was the disciples having to abandon their authority and status, because in that time children were not welcomed into those kind of settings. So it's about inclusion. As I look at our congregation, we, like many congregations, have fewer and fewer children and youth attending our services and activities. And it's not something that's unique to us, obviously. We have Sunday school teachers that give their time to educate. We have musical leaders that help them to provide, their talents to sing their praises, and we have youth leadership to get them to provide fellowship with each other. But it's not just those people that are responsible. It's all of us. It's all of us as a congregation to really look at what we can do to help bring the youth and children back. But even beyond the children and youth, let's bring back those or bring people that are different from us. I think about as we go through the transition of a call, I look at what we're called to do as members of the Christian faith, and more specifically what the ELCA has brought to us. And they quote one here: "Together we faithfully strive to participate in God's reconciliating work, which prioritizes disenfranchised, vulnerable, and displaced people in our communities and the world." And this could mean a lot of things. It could be reaching out to the hungry in our communities and in the world. It could be clothing the poor. It could be responding to disasters. But I look at myself, I say, what can I do? When I read this, I said, disenfranchised. I look, where are those, when I want to reach out to those that haven't been in the congregation because of our transition, or because they are disenfranchised, do I have the courage to go out of my comfort zone to reach out to them and be able to say, how are you? What are you doing with your faith? Maybe they're worshiping somewhere else, and that's great. But maybe they can come back and we can bring them back with us. Or could I go across the street to my neighbor who doesn't speak the way I do and say, hey, do you know Christ? Would you be willing to come to St. Paul's? Because we got a lot going on. What do those things look like, and how do I get out of my comfort zone? I appreciate that when we have these talks, we talk a lot about the things that we do well. And we do a lot. We do a lot. But a lot of times it's the same people. So it's always a challenge that we have to look at ourselves to be able to, reach in and get out of our comfort zone, to be able to do these functions and establish the ministries that we have within our congregation. One thought I'd like to share with you is I work for a company out of the New England area, a retailer, mid-sized, about 130 stores. Our owner, has been very honest with us over the last 10 years or so. I've only been there 4 years, but he shared these stories with us. For the first 30 years of his owning this business, he didn't give back to the community like he should, or thought he should. It wasn't as important to him. He wanted to be the greatest retailer, the greatest boss, the greatest. Then he discovered that, it's okay to give back. And in his words that he shared with us just recently, he said, you discover that it's not that hard. It doesn't hurt. And you know what? It's a hell of a lot of fun. So those things become really important. And by the way, this company is the largest contributor of donated food in the Northeast United States. Not the Walmarts, not the Targets, but this little mid-sized company is the highest donator of food. 220 trailers last year of food. So he wasn't the greatest bosses, but he's the greatest contributor to what he has in his world. So my challenge to each one of you as we continue this journey, heading into the season where we typically go through our commitments and look at our stewardship, is don't do what makes you the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Do what's going to be fun, and do what's going to burn in your hearts through this season and through our transition and in our future at St. Paul's. Thank you, and God bless.